They told us vaccines were safe. They told us to trust the science. Remember that phrase? But when researchers tracked over 18,000 children for a decade, the truth shattered their narrative. Vaccinated kids had 496% more autoimmune disease, 453% more neurodevelopmental disorders, 329% more asthma, and 203% more atopic disease. And after 10 years, 57% of vaccinated children were chronically ill, and only 17% of the unvaccinated were. And here's the shocker. Unvaccinated kids, folks, had 0 cases of brain dysfunction, ADHD, learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, or tics. This wasn't just another study. This was the most important vaccine safety study ever conducted. And guess what? They buried it. They suppressed it. They hid it from the people who needed it the most, the parents. So why? Because Big Pharma has no liability. Since 1986, they've been shielded by the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. No accountability, no responsibility, just profit. If your child is injured, guess what? You can't sue them. You can't drag them into court. You can't even hold them accountable. See, it's time to end this injustice. It's time to repeal the vaccine liability shield and put Big Pharma back under the same law as every other industry. No company should ever be above the law, especially when our children's health is at stake. See, I'm going to play the devil's advocate because there are many critics and arguments to this study. So let's go through some of them. They'll say it wasn't peer-reviewed or published, so it can't be trusted. Look, many groundbreaking findings in history, they were initially rejected or slow-walked by the gatekeepers. Peer review is valuable, but it's not infallible, especially on politically charged topics like vaccines. Suppression, institutional pressure, and conflicts of interest may keep inconvenient studies from seeing daylight. That doesn't erase the underlying data, folks. They'll say that healthcare visits were much lower among the unvaccinated kids, so more diagnoses were missed. Well, the study authors anticipated this criticism and did sensitivity analysis only including children with at least one medical encounter and testing different follow-up lengths, 1, 3, and 5 years. The patterns persisted. Also, the argument assumes unvaccinated kids are secretly just as sick, but they're never brought in. Yet parents who choose not to vaccinate it, they're often very hyper-aware of health risk, use alternative care, and track their children very closely. They're not simply just ignoring chronic illness. They're actually way ahead of it. They'll say unvaccinated kids had less time in the system, so less chance to be diagnosed. That's similar to the argument that we just talked about. Again, even when restricted to kids with adequate follow-up time, the relative differences, they remain striking. A bias might explain some gap, folks, but not a 400 to 500% spike in neurodevelopmental disorders. You can't deny that. Confounding variables, they'll say, weren't fully controlled. No, look, no study can perfectly control every variable, but this data set adjusted for sex, race, prematurity, birth weight, and more, large effect sizes, 200 to 500% increases, are unlikely to be explained away by diet or household income alone. Plus, if confounding were the main driver, you'd expect mixed results. Some conditions higher, some lower. Instead, nearly every chronic disease category was way worse in what group? The vaccinated group. They'll say that the numbers are inconsistent with known prevalence. Well, known prevalence, as they say, is based on surveillance where nearly all kids are vaccinated. If vaccines are contributing to chronic disease, the baseline we have accepted as normal is actually elevated. The Henry Ford data offers a rare glimpse of what true baseline rates in unvaccinated kids may look like. Pretty shocking. They'll say that association doesn't equal causation. Look, that's true. But when you see consistent, and that's the word, consistent associations across multiple disease categories, large effect sizes, and clear exposure versus outcome, it's more than just a coincidence. Observational studies are how we first detected harm from smoking, asbestos, and leaded gasoline. Waiting for perfect causality standards delayed action for decades. So you just had to look at this with a little common sense, right? Because they'll also say that selection bias, unvaccinated families are just different. Yeah, they are. They are different, but usually in ways that should predict better outcomes for the vaccinated, right? More access to care, higher compliance with medical advice, etc. Yet despite these advantages, vaccinated kids were sicker across the board. That suggests the signal isn't just family differences. They may say that Henry Ford itself said it didn't meet scientific standards. Well, that statement could reflect institutional risk management, not science. Publishing results that challenge vaccine safety threatens funding, reputation, and partnerships with pharma. Internal politics often decides which data sees the light of day, not just scientific merit. We seen that during the pandemic, didn't we? The bigger picture, you have to understand, is critics often focus on imperfections, but all large cohort studies have them. The real question is this, is whether the flaws can account for the magnitude and consistency, there's that word again, of the findings. See, supporters argue the signal is too strong to ignore. 200 to 500% higher rates of chronic diseases across multiple categories, not just one, multiple, in these vaccinated kids, versus strikingly low rates in the unvaccinated. At minimum, these findings warrant replication and independent investigation, not dismissal. We just can't sweep this underneath the rug. We need to talk about it. We need to do more studies, because if we're truly harming our children, man, there should be liability for that.